This is Larry Zbyszko, wrestling's living legend, and we're perched on the top rope.
The following announcement has been paid for by Perched on the Top Rope.
Welcome, everyone, to Perched on the Top Rope. I am your host, former dirt sheet writer from Ringside News, Sportskeeda, The Sportster, you name it, I've written there. I'm Lee Walker. I am joined by WWE Hall of Famer, the living legend, Larry Zbyszko. Larry, I must say, that's a fantastic shirt.
Oh, thank you. You know, Florida wear, fancy shirts, loose flip-flops. I hate shoes.
Yeah,
Yeah, you got a good shirt on, too. I like it.
I got to ask, the other day, probably the biggest news in professional wrestling dropped. What are your thoughts on Vince McMahon retiring?
Oh, well, I really don't know. I'm 70 years old, and I'm kind of retired. I'm to the point now where I really don't want to work. I don't need the money, but I get kind of bored. So maybe once a month I'll fly out and do an autograph signing, or once every 2 months I'll fly out, and I get a whole bunch of, podcast requests. So it's like you can never really disappear. But I like meeting the fans and going out. The last couple of years flying has been a pain in the butt with the COVID and the lines and the delays and so I slow down. But maybe once a month, once every 2 months, I'll fly out somewhere. But Vince too. Vince, was a workaholic and he's, I started, basically right after Vince kind of started, for the WWF and his dad.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked his butt off. He was a workaholic, and after he'd work, he'd go upstairs above the office. He had a gym, he'd work out. He was buff. And, but after a while, how much life do you have left? Do you want to spend the rest of your life working, or do you want to spend the rest of your life with your grandkids? If I was Vince, I'd buy a yacht and sail around and see different paradises around this beautiful planet. And, he's got Stephanie, who's a very, very nice woman, but very smart, and Triple H, who loves the business. So the business he created, which really was an amazing thing, because what pro wrestling was in the 60s and 70s, actually, you can look at me and Bruno and Shea Stadium, and that big thing kind of marks the end of an era. And then, unfortunately, Vince Sr. passed. And when Vince Jr., took it, he really didn't, there was really nothing there. It was on the verge of going under or whatever, but he really took a gamble and put everything he owned up online to start, something that became bigger than the Super Bowl, WrestleMania.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Vince is an amazing creator. So, I got to give him credit, but, at 77, God, my dad made it to 93. He's still going. But, it gets to a point, too, where you say, hey, I only got so many years left. I want to enjoy it. And I don't blame him. I'm basically retired. Once in a while, I like flying out and meeting the fans and doing that. But what do you want to work your ass off till death? What's the point?
If you do that, then you really didn't live.
Yeah, God, if I was Vince, I'd buy a yacht, and I got my private jet, and I'd go see the world. He's got grandkids and, good family, and
yeah,
and people that will take, what he created, between Stephanie and Triple H, and I don't know what Shane's doing, but they all love the business. They're very smart, and they're surrounded by some people, including me. Like I'll help Triple H and Stephanie out whatever I can. The PC, the Performance Center, where we want to create more, new attractions, new stars. Because the wrestling is at a stage where they need a new era of big stars. Pretty soon they're going to, right now, Brock Lesnar's the big baby, big hero. People believe in him.
Yeah.
And you got a couple other guys that are good. Bobby Lashley looks good. You know, Omos is a giant kind of guy that's big, and Drew and some others. But you're getting to the point where they've been there for 10 years, wrestling each other. You need a new era of stars. And the Performance Center right down the street, you know, I was sticking my head in there before and helping out some guys, but then the COVID crap came in and kind of delayed that stuff. So I really haven't been involved, but I've been watching and keeping my eye on some things. But it's really a new era. So
Yeah.
hopefully it'll be great. You know, great. But what Vince created was unbelievable.
Oh, absolutely. And you there's a lot you just brought up all in there that I want to talk about actually. But the first thing I want to hit is you know, with things with COVID seemingly kind of calming down and everything, could we still have a chance at seeing the living legend at the PC?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's a chance. I mean, I don't want to work there because they got coaches there.
Yeah.
And they work their butts off, and sometimes they got to be there at 7:30 in the morning, and they have groups that they work with, and I really don't want to work with a group. What I'd like to do is be a personal tutor. When I get a guy that's ready to be called up to have a shot to be a star, give him to me for a month.
Yeah.
And let me polish the diamond, because there's things you can't learn in a group.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, if you watch the matches, every match is basically really the same. They go back and forth, and they're all jumping and flying and running across the ring into a foot, and clotheslines and 20 woo slaps. And, it gets to the point where you've seen the same people do the same thing for 8, 9, 10 years now. So they need some new stars, and so we'll see what happens. But I got my eye on some things. And
Okay. This always kind of struck me interesting, and then I want to touch on some stuff within your career. We've always known that Vince has been into the bigger guys, big muscular men, and a former world strongman champion, Bill Kazmaier, who you worked with in WCW, had worked a match in WWF. Do you know if there was any reason why Vince Jr., didn't pursue more of the strongman competitors back then? Because I mean, those guys were, they're built and they can move 800, 900, to 1,000 pounds of worth of weight, throwing it and this and that.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the way the business is, you basically kind of got the pyramid of life.
Mm-hmm.
You got the small section of the pyramid on top. That's the big eye, and then you got the rest of the pyramid. And the business today really has more smaller guys. And when I say smaller, I'm talking 210, 200, 190. But they're amazing athletes that are doing amazing things, but they're doing dangerous things too. But there's a lot of them. But if you look at the ones that draw the big money, it's still the big eye of the pyramid. It's still Brock Lesnar. Bobby Lashley is a big, tough guy. Roman Reigns is a big guy. Some guys are big guys like Kazmaier was, but they aren't really super great professional wrestlers, because you need a charisma. You got to be able to talk, so it's more than just being big. But as far as I'm concerned, I still believe it's, to draw big money in a main event at WrestleMania and big house shows, it's still a big man business. Mm-hmm. When guys walk out, the audience, you want the audience to go, holy crap, look at that guy. I wouldn't mess with that guy.
Yeah.
It's still on top, to me, a big man business.
I totally agree with you. And We're seeing a lot of that now in the industry where, you know, it's a lot of guys my size because I'm in that weight that you brought up. And I don't think I'm very big. But like I'm watching these guys on TV and the stuff they're doing is incredible in my eyes. You know, and I was just curious because, you know, Bill Kazmaier was, you know, he was a world's strongest man. And we've even seen in the 70s where, you know, pro wrestlers went and competed in world's strongest man competitions as well.
Oh yeah, Ken Patera was, you know,
Yeah, he was one of
a
them.
big guy. I think an
Yeah.
Olympic gold medal winner with the, you know, weightlifting.
Yeah.
And he was an athletic guy. I mean, it's, you know, he was one of the guys that were that big they could do athletic stuff.
Hmm.
I always thought that when Bruno retired, that maybe Ken was the guy that could, you know, follow him because he was big and athletic and had a legitimate background with the Olympics and all that. Bob Backlund, great guy, but he just couldn't fill Bruno's shoes. Actually, nobody could really fill Bruno's shoes. He was that over.
Yeah. You know, and yeah, I know how much Bruno meant to you. You brought him up in your WWE Hall of Fame speech, and you talk about him a
Well, he
lot.
inducted me, yeah, and my
Yeah,
mentor.
which is incredible. You know, so for you and everything that you've done, would any of it be possible if Bruno didn't come in and guide you through the way? Or how do you think your career would have worked out if Bruno wasn't part?
Well, you know what? It was tough. I mean, if it wasn't for Bruno and me walking to his backyard, knowing him and working out, and him being impressed with my, you know, amateur wrestling background and helping me out, I may never have gotten a big break in the business. You know, because again, back in those days, I mean, the most I ever weighed was about 250. But to weigh 250, I had to eat like a pig. I used to eat, you know, hoagies before bed so I wouldn't lose weight sleeping. But so most of my career I was about 240. And I'm 5'11". I know the stupid Wikipedia and cards say I'm 5'9", but I'm 5'11 and a half. So I don't want to hear it. And at 240, 245, I was benching, you know, 465 and a half pounds and had kind of a Bruno look. But I don't know if I would have got a big break, you know. And at the time, I was so young and happy to be there. I didn't realize the politics that were in my favor because, you know, I may never have gotten into the WWF. But with Bruno picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, Vince, I got a kid I've been working with. I think that can be real good. I'd like you to bring him in." Vince Sr. would say, "Oh, okay, Bruno." So, you know, I had a politics on my side that I didn't even realize I had when I first started.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm gonna jump back real quick. You know, 1980, your infamous heel turn on Bruno and everything. This is an interesting part because I've heard others speak of, you know, turning heel or being a heel, fans shooting at the wrestlers in the ring with guns.
Oh, Bobby Heenan in Chicago, yeah.
Yeah, and for you, and we were just recently in Albany, you know, you were with Captain Corners as you were doing an autograph session. It was actually the Washington Avenue Armory in Albany, New York. You had a match with Ivan Putski, and a fan stabbed you.
Yeah, I got stabbed in the ass. And it was weird too, because back then, I mean, they didn't have the barriers they have now and stuff and security, and it was funny because me and Putski were having a match and people hated me. I mean, they wanted to kill me. But me and Putski were having a match and everybody was, you know, for Putski, except there was one person, one guy in the front row, and he was saying, "Hey, Putski, your mother's ugly." I mean, he hated Putski for some reason. And Putski ignored him, right? We kept the match going. And then the guy was like, "Hey, Putski, you stink." Yeah, nah. And nothing happened. And so then all of a sudden we're wrestling and the guy says, "Hey, Putski, you're short." And Putski lost his mind and jumped out of the ring and attacked the guy. And then, hit him a couple times. And I don't know what happened, but as Putski was getting back in the ring, I thought to myself, well, this is the perfect time to get the big heat. So as Putski was coming back in the ring, I did something to him nasty and won the match and started a riot. People start jumping into the ring. And one of the secrets was to, when you want to escape a riot of the pissed off crowd, I jumped out of the ring and you start acting like a crazy guy, right? Well, all of a sudden, I'm acting like a crazy guy trying to get back to the dressing room. And I feel this thing hit me in the head. I go, ow, and I turn around to hit, but it was like an 80-year-old guy that hit me on the head with a crutch. And after he hit me, he fell over on the ground, and people coming at me like were trampling over him, covered with chairs, stepping on the old guy. And I started acting crazy again, and all of a sudden I felt like someone kicked me in the ass. And I spun around again to hit another guy, but two cops grabbed the guy and started hitting him with slapjacks and dragging him out. But when the cops dragged the guy away, I was all by myself with the crowd still coming at me. So I went berserk and I made it to the dressing room. And I never forget it because there was so much noise and pandemonium and stuff going on in the arena. When I got back in the dressing room, Arnold Skolin, who was the agent for that show, was sitting at the table playing cribbage with Andre. And they were like calm, and Arnold went, hey, it sounded good. How'd it go? Like, no big deal. And I went, no, it went good, had a riot, people went berserk. I said, but God, someone kicked me in the ass good. And I felt like a Charlie horse. And I put my hand back there and I felt this thing in my butt. And I pulled it out, and it was a long, skinny blade. And I don't know if you remember the days, but like from Japan, they had those wooden knives that were like a wooden thing, and the blade would go in the long wooden part.
Yep.
It was a long, thin blade, and when I turned to hit the guy, I must have broke it off of the handle. The thing that scared me the most was going to the hospital to get a tetanus shot. But I used to have to hide in trunks. I mean, I'd, meet somebody, park my car somewhere, and then get in a trunk and be driven up to an arena. Yeah, I mean, it was a different era, a different time, and the people were so into it. But, that lasted 80, and that was starting to cool down by 84, 85.
Yeah, and that actually kind of brought something up to me is, back then, as professional wrestlers, you guys were able to, as heels, draw so much heat. Fans basically attempted murder on wrestlers that, like we said, Heenan with Chicago, with the gunshots, you being stabbed.
I was shot at.
I've heard a lot of stories of like you talking about people throwing bricks at you above the buildings and trashing and stuff. Do you think that, obviously as wrestling has changed, do you think that the heels of today can draw that type of heat or able to draw that type of heat with fans?
I really don't think so. I really don't think so. And, it's a different world. And the fans, especially with the social media, everybody's talking to everybody. And even the wrestlers are talking and saying stuff they shouldn't be saying. Because the less the fans know what's going on, the more suspense it is for them. It's more fun for the fans not to know everything. I mean, when you go to a movie, you don't want a guy to tell you who the murderer is before you see the movie. You want to go enjoy the movie. Yeah. But I don't think there can be the kind of heat that there was in the 60s and the 70s. I think that's an era gone by. Plus, the way that you can say the word heel now, I mean, again, we go back to the way guys are in the ring doing things with these amazing athletes. You got guys who might supposed to be the heel or the guy you don't like, but they're in the ring doing amazing things, diving and flipping off the top rope and doing amazing moves. So it's like, well, how can you hate them? This guy just did a hell of an amazing move to the guy, and then the good guy gets up and runs across the corner into the bad guy's foot, so the good guy looks like an idiot. So the whole psychology of really being a true hated guy and a truly loved guy is kind of lost. It's kind of like turned into a really super athletic demolition derby of bodies taking turns crashing into things and getting, I mean, my God, some of the stuff they do is amazing. I mean, getting suplexed off the top of the turnbuckle through metal chairs on the floor. I'm glad they invented and thought of this stuff after I retired from the ring and got into the broadcast part. Because it's really, I mean, yeah, I mean, they're amazing athletes doing amazing things, but there's not that believability. It looks like a pre-choreographed, event. And the psychology where the good guy runs into a foot, he looks like an idiot, not a good guy.
Yeah.
And the bad guy doesn't get heat because he didn't cheat. He outsmarted the good guy.
Yeah.
So it's simple. It's lost, but there's so much action, almost too much, because it goes so fast. You can't get into the characters. Everybody's the same. Every match starts out kicking, punching into the corner, throw you reverse. I'll run in, kick me in the face, and I'll run back into your elbow. Then you come out, and I'll reverse you. And what the hell's going on? Anybody know a hold?
Well, one of my favorite things that we talked about while you were actually in Albany with Captain's Corners was the fact that you and Bobby the Brain Heenan on commentary chose not to know what was going on or like have a script, because you talked about how you guys would ad lib, and it was more believable that way, not knowing what was going on. Because like as a fan, for me, when the commentator's excited and it's genuine, I'm more excited about what's happening. So,
well, yeah, me too. Yeah, I mean, me and Bobby never went to any meetings they had. And then again, even then in the 90s, it wasn't like it is today. There was no rehearsals and that, whatever meetings they have. And me and Bobby, we'd just be out in the back having a smoke, and laughing at all the guys waiting in line for a drug test. But we didn't. But we never. Everything was strictly. We go out there and it's strictly ad libbed. I wanted to be involved in and call it like I see it. And I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, I appreciate that as a fan. I really do, because that made a lot of wrestling for me better. And since like you didn't know while you were on commentary things that were going to happen, and just having fun with it, ad libbing, and Heenan was always hilarious. Was there anyone in particular that you enjoyed calling their match?
God, you know what? I mean, I kind of enjoyed calling all of them because, I mean, there was still good characters there, back then. And there was still the more good guy, bad guys, so it was fun. And of course, when the New World Order started, I was kind of very influential in that whole scenario. I'm the one that didn't really name it, but I kept saying New World Order, and Bischoff heard it and took it. And then I programmed everything the way Scott Hall came in, and the New World Order happened, and Bischoff on. So I was programmed me and Bischoff and me and Hall. So I had a big hand, and I'm really, proud of myself because I'm the one that really got the New World Order off to the big start, which is the important part, because if you start it off right, then you can get the most out of it and the fans get into it the most. If you start something off stupid, it's stupid. But that was great. I mean, I think one of the most proud I'm doing was being involved in the beginning of all that. And Eric listening to me.
The whole NWO thing, like the whole storyline to it was, in my opinion, was incredible. I always remember the first time seeing Scott Hall, and it was your voice that distinctly I remember basically saying, "He doesn't work here. What is he doing here?" When he was, as he showed up for the first time. And you talked about, the name, and we've heard Eric on 83 Weeks talk about this with you, with the NWO, and then WCW producer Neil Pruitt, being the voice of doing the following announcement has been paid for by the New World Order. I love that. And fans, we actually worked with Neil, and you can listen to that interview on youtube.com/perched on the top rope. It was, the whole NWO thing was incredible. The thing that you did with Scott Hall and even Louis Spicolli, that whole feud and everything was just so beautifully done.
It was, yeah, that's too bad. It was supposed to happen, but then, yeah, it was sad.
Yeah. He was part of, Louis was part of it in the beginning, and, unfortunately he had passed away and things like that. But I'm going to come back a little bit to the WWF. You get your first championship with Tony Gurria as the tag team champions. And, you, at the same time, while you're a champion with Tony, having 6-man tags with Andre the Giant. So, what was it like for you to win the tag team gold and teaming with Andre, but also working with Andre in New Japan Pro Wrestling?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, yeah, I knew Andre well. We traveled a lot together, especially in Japan. We'd ride a bullet because Andre loved to play cribbage. So me and Andre would play cribbage for hours on the bullet train all over through Japan and stuff. And we got along really good. And Tony was a great guy. When I first got to the WWF, I was like 21, just starting out, and young, naive, dumb, but so excited. And Tony was there a little bit, before me. And so he knew where all the towns were and this and that. And so it was good. I mean, and he was a great partner, to be a tag team with. And after a couple of years of living on the road in the cars, got the hours and hours we spent in the car. So I got a private pilot's license. And I start flying myself to towns. So instead of driving 4 hours each way, it'd take me an hour or so to fly, there. And I'd take some guys with me once in a while. Could never get Bruno in a plane. He would never get in a plane. And Tony didn't want to get in a plane. He didn't want to fly with me. He thought we'd get killed. So one time I hijacked him. And it had to do with Albany, New York, because we were living in New Haven, Connecticut. And I told Tony, we were talking about turns driving, on the road. So I said, well, I'll pick you up Friday. I'll drive. It's not that far, blah, blah, blah. And I said, I'll pick you up at 3:30 or 4 or something. Okay. And then I get a call like the day before the show, and he found out it was in Albany, which is like a 3.5-hour drive one way. And he goes, you bastard, it's Albany. We'll never get there in time. I said, yeah, we'll get there in plenty of time. I got the airplane. And there's a moment of silence, and Tony goes, you bastard. So he wasn't going to miss a payday. So I pick him up. He sits in the car, and he's got his arms crossed, doesn't say a word. We get in the plane, and I'm flying to Albany, and he's sitting in the co-pilot seat with his arms crossed, not saying a word. He didn't say a word to me, just pouting. And we land and do this show, and then he came back with me in the plane, and on the way back, he's loosening up. He's going, well, what does this do? Because now he's realizing, well, hell, we'll be back at home by midnight, and the other guys won't be back till 4 a.m, And it was funny because then a couple weeks after that, he started taking flying lessons. But he took a few and then stopped. He didn't get into it. But I hijacked him one time, yeah. But it was fun. He was a good guy and fun to travel with.
Oh, very cool. one thing I'm looking at an action figure here, and it's William Regal, and 94 you defeated him for the television championship in WCW. What was it like to work with Lord Steven Regal, or as we know him now in AEW and his now throughout WWE is William Regal?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I was doing the broadcasting, and I was by 1994. By the time when Regal got there, I was already starting to lose my mind over how the work was deteriorating, and guys didn't know what they were doing. And you had the Nasty Boys and the other guys and some Public Enemies. And I mean, every match started being clotheslines. I mean, in 1995, I was sick of saying, wow, what a clothesline. And today's all you see is clotheslines, or they throw clotheslines over someone's head as they run by each other. And then Regal came in, and he was a guy from England, and Regal could wrestle. And he was a great character, had a great look. He knew how to work, and he would get in the ring and with that obnoxious looking up, and people would boo, and I could feel he would get heat like the old days, just standing there. But there was really no one in the dressing room. You know, Sting, Luger, all these guys with the clotheslines, and that could really give him a good match. So I said, hell, I'll do it. So I took myself, out of the broadcasting for a special little feud with Regal. And I think the first match we had was on TBS. They broke it up into 2 segments because it went like 30 minutes or so. I was dying. But they did it for the summer ratings because they broke it in half. Like you watched most of the match, but then they ran out of time. So the week after, and we had the highest summer ratings ever. But after that match, I'm in the back. Brian Pillman was running around the back room going, my God, did you see that? They wrestled 30 minutes and they didn't throw one clothesline. And it was a hell of a match. And then we had another one at the pay-per-view. It was good. So I tried to show the guys, you can have a match, because it was already starting to turn into another form of match, and then it got farther and farther away. But I tried.
Yeah.
But Rico was good. He was a good character, and he came from a different school where he knew how to wrestle and do things. So,
well, along with that feud, you got to wrestle a gentleman named Terror Rising, also, who we now know is a young Triple H.
Yeah, I had a few matches with Triple H when he first started, but not many, just maybe a few, I think.
What did you think of? What did you think of him early on when you got to work with him?
Well, I mean, to tell you the truth, he was a new guy just starting.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I handled him different, but I really didn't think too much because I wasn't in the wrestling. I did the thing with Regal and had some matches with Triple H and maybe another guy just to, for the build up to the final Regal thing. But I really wasn't thinking of the wrestling because I was wanting to get back to the commentary. But, but back then, Paul was a new guy, a big guy, and when I think back about it, I probably got in the ring with him because, he was a big guy and he had a chance, but, just a new guy. And a lot of the guys, were new. He was new. I mean, Sting was new. Luger was kind of new. And the Steiners were kind of new. And, different generations, Shawn Michaels and them, they were kind of that generation that followed mine. In fact, those guys were the last generation that got to wrestle the old school guys, because the old school guys were getting too old and disappearing. But that generation was the last generation that got in the ring and could work with workers who knew, the psychology and how to work and stuff.
Yeah. It always interested me once I had seen all this, because we know Triple H, WWE Hall of Famer, and heck of a career and just came back to WWE. So I wanted to ask about that. Now, you're on commentary. It's now like the late 90s. You actually have a retirement match in WCW against Curt Hennig. But then I noticed like a month,
I don't remember a lot of
December 99, because I found it weird that a month later in 2000 they brought you back with some other wrestlers to feud with like the NWO 2000.
Really?
Yeah. It was on,
I believe you.
no, it was on Nitro. It was December 99, and then a month later they brought you back with a few other guys like Rick Steiner and stuff like that. And then shortly after the feud with NWO, you left the company in 2000. So what was the reason for leaving?
Well, what happened was, and it was too bad, really, because I mean, the new World Order in WCW. I mean, we were doing like 11 rating. It was hot, had some great stars, and it was sad. But what happened? Here's what happened. Like about a year or so before WCW went off the air, Turner sold out to Time Warner. So Ted, who was the fan and knew the TV business, because wrestling was always just one of the highest rated shows, he sold out to Turner Time Warner. In fact, it wasn't too long ago on the news, you could hear how mad Ted was he sold, because he hated what CNN became. But Time Warner didn't want sports. They didn't want wrestling. They didn't want the baseball Braves. They didn't want the basketball. But WCW had like a year of contracts they had to fulfill with pay-per-view networks and other TV places and buildings. So when it came to like renew our contracts, like me and Bobby Heenan and some other guys, maybe even Eric, I think, they wouldn't renew them because they knew that within a year the show was going to be canceled. So I kind of lucked out. In the years I was doing the broadcasting was the years where Ted was giving money away like it was going out of style. It was amazing. I made more money broadcasting than wrestling over the years. And there was guys that weren't drawing anything that were making, $400,000 or $500,000 a year plus merchandise, which was unheard of in the 70s and that. But they knew the show was going to get canceled, so they didn't renew my contract or Bobby Heenan's contract and some other guys. So that's why we wound up leaving. And then I think they brought in this idiot Russo to be a writer. And it had a sad death. I mean, you got people chanting Goldberg because they had the guy. And who's the heavyweight champion of the world while the people are chanting Goldberg? Vince Russo, the writer. I mean, it was just so stupid. I couldn't even watch. I turned the TV off and I didn't watch wrestling for like 10 years. I got into the golf and moved to Florida and tried some pro golf. But it was really a sad death. But that's what happened. They just knew Turner Time Warner was going to cancel the show within a year and didn't renew certain contracts. And it was kind of a sad ending to something that was really the hottest thing wrestling became. Yeah,
it really was. And I was a huge fan of WCW. Anytime NWO was on,
oh yeah, it was hot.
You bring up Russo. You kind of got to work with Russo in TNA a little bit. What was your thoughts? Because from my understanding, you had an angle with AJ Styles. I
did a little thing. Me and AJ had a hell of a match when he was young, and there was some talks about maybe me managing AJ. That never happened, and it worked out where, I think Jeff Jarrett was the Russo guy, because when Russo was with the WWE, he wrote some things about try to get Jeff Jarrett a push. Mm-hmm. So Jeff felt obligated and had him come in when Jeff was running Impact or TNA, whenever that started. And I just happened to be in Florida, so it worked out good because I was in Florida, and then they were doing their filming like at Universal.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a couple things. I had a hell of a match with AJ. And then I wound up, I think, maybe like being like the general manager for a little bit. But I didn't do too much. I was more into the golf. And then I think the Jarrett sold out to, what was her name?
It was Dixie.
I can't remember. Dixie, yeah, to Dixie Carter. But it was fun. I mean, there was some good guys there. I mean, AJ was there, and the Abyss, and Chris Daniels, and some other guys. And it was funny because they would run up to me because back in those days, ESPN was playing the old AWA shows from the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And they were playing, and I mean, AJ and Daniels and the Abyss and some other guy. They'd run up to me after watching, the old AWA, shows from ESPN, and they go, "Larry, how could you have been such an asshole?" They couldn't get how I could be so nasty and hated. Well, that's what the bad guy was, But it was funny because I took that as a big compliment.
Oh yeah, I mean, a great heel, and you brought up the great match with AJ in TNA. What do you think of his career in WWE now?
I'll tell you what, I mean AJ, he's really been working his butt off, and to get there, what he was like in Japan for 10 years, because he kind of disappeared for a while because I didn't pay much attention to wrestling. And then I heard he was in Japan for like some years.
Mm-hmm.
But he came into WWE, and he's one of their top guys, and I mean, he does a great job. I mean, at least when AJ comes out,
Yeah, and another one is that was there at the same time as AJ, who's also in WWE, is Ron R-Truth Killings.
Oh yeah, Ron Killings. I knew Ron for years. He's a character, and he's amazing because he's like 50 years old now and can still do them splits. And Ron's a great guy, but yeah, he's another one at TNA. But AJ, I mean, he's still flying around doing the same stuff. Ron's still there, but I think it gets. I don't know how much longer it's going to go on, because it gets to the point where, after so many years, you see the same guy and you go, "Oh God, yeah, that's great. He's great. They do that." But in every match, they do the same stuff. So after some years, it's like, God, yeah, this guy's great. Is there anybody else to watch? Because you've seen it so much,
Yeah, yeah.
But that's the thing. I mean, wrestling's not a long-term guaranteed career. I mean, my favorite guy to watch, who's the biggest, good guy in the business that people believe in, is Brock Lesnar, because he's a real guy. But you don't see Brock much. He doesn't wrestle every week. So when he does show up, it's something special.
Yeah. No, it really is, and he's like a fine wine. It seems like he's only getting better with age.
Well, yeah, I mean, and he's a real guy, so it's easy to pretend in Brock when he comes out.
Yeah,
because
watch him rip a car door off a car and throw it. That was incredible to watch on Raw one night. Another thing I want to bring up is you also worked a match in Ring of Honor, which is now owned by Tony Khan, in 2009 or 2010. You wrestled Scotty 2 Hotty in Ring of Honor.
I did.
Yeah, Johnny Fair.
I believe, but I did so many. Yeah.
So the special referee was actually from Survivor, Johnny Fairplay.
I remember Johnny Fairplay.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that match and how it came about, you ending up in Ring of Honor.
God, you know what, Lee? To be honest with you, I mean, after so many years and stuff, the time you're talking about, I was probably golfing, and I'd be getting calls because it was a time when like indie I mean, I'm amazed on like the indie thing.
Mhm.
There's so many indies, and like things like the Ring of Honor would pop up, which was like an indie to me because the WWE was it and WCW was it. But then I didn't even know if they were on TV or what. But I'd be getting calls and offers. Hey, do you want to come in and do a shot? And they'd make I didn't even really know who I was going in for. But I vaguely remember something with Scotty Too Hotty. To be honest with you, not really, because it might have been one time, and I was, kind of more into retirement and golfing than I was the wrestling. But on the weekends, there was so many indies. I'd fly here and do a match up in Maine, or fly up and do a match around Chicago, but it was for somebody else or some other group, and I don't know. I don't remember.
All right.
That's tough.
Hey,
there was so many of them.
I mean, you've had thousands and thousands of matches, and the fact I'm trying to like pinpoint one particular match.
Yeah,
Totally understand. Trust me, I can totally understand. To me, there's something special, as you see behind me. I'm also a figure collector.
I see all the little guys behind you. Yeah.
Yeah. So you had a WWE Elite come out in a special box with Nash and Eddie Guerrero and things like that, which that box set is extremely hard to find and expensive now. But you also had an AWA figure with their Remco figures that they did.
Excuse me.
Oh, you're fine. So, when these figures of you were coming out, especially your first one, what did you think of it? Was like it a big deal for you? Because most wrestlers, it's just but before then, it was just a T-shirt or a promo to sign an autograph and things like that.
You know what? Before that, I mean, there wasn't merchandise. I think it came around probably starting around the mid '80s.
Mm-hmm.
And the first figure I had is an interesting story behind this. Was it when I was in the AWA, and I think it was AWA had action figures that came out with two people together.
Yeah, 2-packs.
Yeah, 2-packs. And here's the interesting story behind it, because when the dolls first came out, of the AWA dolls, they had 2-packs. But with my doll, it was me in the AWA, and the other doll was Ric Flair. Ric Flair wasn't in the AWA. He was in the NWA. And there's a reason that it was a me doll and a Ric Flair doll. And here's the story behind that, because this is when it first started, and we didn't realize how great merchandising was going to become.
Mm-hmm.
But what was supposed to happen was at the time, the era was changing into nationwide cable and all that. The Crockett's and the Gagnes were trying to work together to run shows to compete against Vince. They ran the Meadowlands together and some other shows together. And then they had this idea, and the reason me and Flair were in the same packet were because when these dolls were to be released, there was things that were going to happen where guys from the AWA were going to invade some NWA show or vice versa. And it was funny because I remember walking into a studio one day in the AWA, and Vern pulled me over and said, "Hey, make a couple interviews knocking Flair and challenging him to a match." Because he wasn't in the territory. He was in, with the Crockett's. And I went, "Really? Is he coming here?" And Vern said, "Well, not just do that." So I made a couple of, interviews challenging Flair and knocking him. And then Flair was supposed to, make a couple of interviews from the NWA, reaming me and knocking me back, and some bad mouthing between the two different networks and territories. And then one territory was going to invade the other. And that's why me and Flair wound up in the same pack, because we were supposed to be wrestling each other when these dolls came out. But at the last minute, the Crockett's and Gagne's, something didn't work out, and it never happened. That's why they came out with a collector edition with me and Bockwinkel in the pack. But the interesting part was that same idea that was going to happen was the idea that 10 years later became the New World Order scenario, where we made it look like one group was invading the other group.
Yeah.
So that's where the whole idea started, was back, popped up back in the mid 80s, and why the doll collection. Yeah. If you got a thing with a me and Flair doll in it, that was going to be the beginning of what 10 years later became the same idea that was the New World Order.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. That is very interesting. That's incredible, actually.
Yeah.
I'm a big, figure collector and everything like that. And usually I like to, if I meet a wrestler or someone in the business and they have a figure, I get it signed, unless it's too expensive, because finding yours they are expensive online now. Oh yeah. Yeah. Finding them in package is very difficult and very expensive. Anything from the 80s and the early 90s, the figures are not cheap. I
think they got some new figures coming out, I think. And then there's a movie I did with Glacier and Luther and Ming and Ernie the Cat Miller, and
it was called the Bunch.
Yeah, it was called the Replaceables, but they changed it to the Unbreakable Bunch, where a group of wrestlers save a town from aliens.
Yeah,
it's all done, and it should be out. They're thinking either late fall or right after the holidays, because they don't want to compete with the big movies of the year. And
yeah.
And but it's going to be a really cool movie. It's not a wrestling movie, but it's with wrestlers and some great, got with Ernie and Glacier there. And I mean, there's some great fight scenes, but it's really a cool movie. The fans are going to love it. And if you're not a wrestling fan, you're going to love it, because it was done very well. So I can't wait to see the movie.
Yeah, me either. And fans, if you want to hear more in detail, a couple of weeks ago, I got to speak with Larry in person in Albany, New York. And if you go to the Unbreakable Bunch movie page on Facebook, you can actually watch that clip, Larry talking about his persona in the movie, plays legend.
Yeah, easy part for me.
Yeah. So you can go there and check that out, and you can listen to it more here as well. Larry, there's one last thing I wanted to ask that I didn't get to in the beginning regarding Vince McMahon. You'd done an interview with Hannibal TV where you talked Vince Jr., who just retired, wanting to wrestle, but Vince Sr., his father, telling him, no, now is not the time. If Vince would have wrestled back then, how do you think he would have fared?
Well, he probably would have done pretty good. I mean, he was, an avid conditioning workout guy. And, you can see him when he did, in the ring, he was looking good. And he could talk. I mean, I think Vince would have done really good, but, his dad didn't want him to be one of the boys.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted, so Vince didn't do it. But then later on, Vince got in the ring and did some really classic things. Vince was one of the best characters he ever had.
Yeah.
And he was buffed.
Yeah. and just recent, they showed him still in the weight room, working out every day and everything.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was a workaholic. He'd be in the office all day doing all this stuff, and he had a gym on the floor above his office. So after working all day, he'd go up to the gym and work out. And when you saw him in the ring in the 90s, and he was buffed. I mean, and he wasn't a big guy. Vince used to take his shoes off when he'd interview the guys in the 70s and that, calling the show, because he was like 6'1" or so he didn't want to look bigger than some of the wrestlers.
Is there anyone wrestling today that a younger Larry Zbyszko would have wanted to work with?
I'm thinking. I mean, I was so good. I hate to blow smoke up my butt, but I was so good. I could have a great match with about anybody.
Okay.
But I mean, God, I mean, Brock was one of my, favorites. It would have been fun to have a match with Brock. I mean, big tough guys, but I mean, and there's a bunch of them. There's so many great athletes today, but big looking guys. I mean, I could have a hell of a match with anybody in my prime, but I mean, you got guys anywhere from Drew McIntyre to Bobby Lashley. I mean, you got some other guys that, I missed their career. I mean, God, so you can make a list of them. I mean, because there was a bunch of them. It's hard to put my finger on like any one or two guys. Anyone from The Undertaker, Stone Cold, Steve Austin. I could have some classics with Steve. I mean, the list can go on.
Yeah. I mean, you just listed off 5-6 great guys right there alone. So
there's more if I thought about it, but
Yeah. Last question here before I let you go, Larry, and I want to thank you for coming on and joining me today. Ric Flair's retirement match. What do you think about it? And it's Ric Flair with his son-in-law Andrade taking on Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal. What do you think of Ric Flair having another retirement match, and who do you think's going to win?
Another retirement match. I really don't know. I heard Flair was planning to have one, but I mean, you saw me earlier. I have my flip phone. Yeah. So I don't do social media. I don't tweet, face plant, and Insta geek, whatever it is. So I really don't know. I mean, I'm saying to myself, why in the hell is he getting back in the ring? I mean, one false move and you're gonna, guys that age, I'm not getting in the ring. You can get hurt. Plus, he's got a pacemaker, so But it's a tag match, right?
Yep, it's him and his son-in-law, Andrade.
Yeah, so he probably. I doubt he's going to be in there most of the time. Probably be Andrade, but I don't know. Hey, he wants to do it. I mean, it's. God bless him. I hope he winds up okay and doesn't get hurt. But I just think it gets to the point where instead of getting over, people look at you and start feeling sorry for you. Like, my God, this guy can get hurt. He's too old. This isn't. Even Bruno told me years ago there's a point where you just get too old to be real.
Yeah. Well, Larry, I want to thank you for coming on today. I had a great time speaking with you.
Anytime, Lee, we can figure this out, how to get the picture. It took me a half an hour to get on Zoom.
Yeah, fans, for those who don't know, before we were doing this, we were on the phone with each other trying to figure it out. We had some technical difficulties. So, again,
well, my dumbness is what it was. I can't work a computer.
Larry, is there anything you'd like to tell the fans before we go?
No, the same thing I said in my speech. I mean, the wrestling fans are the greatest fans of all. I love you all, and my dream came true, and I hope all your dreams come true too, because life is a beautiful experience on this beautiful living planet. So enjoy it, because it's a temporary thing, and it should be a great dream if you make it that way. So good luck.
I agree. Larry, thank you for coming on. Fans, you can find us anywhere and everywhere. Podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher. It's Perched on the Top Rope. You can find us youtube.com, Perched on the Top Rope. You can find us Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Everything is Perched on the Top Rope. And fans, remember, spoiler free's the way to be. We're out.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching that video. If you liked what you saw, make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can get all our content here at Perched on the Top Rope. And fans, remember, spoiler free's the way to be. I'm out.